Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to ProMed's webinar on safety considerations for medical providers at events and incidents. My name is Matt. I'm Managing Director of ProMed. I'm a qualified teacher and I've got around about 10 years experience looking after kind of safety at events, not just from the medical side, but from the event side, from the crowd safety side, and a few other different roles. So tonight we're going to have a little brief look at all the different things that we need to provide, perhaps at short notice, but certainly from the event side that we are able to kind of do from more sort of different things. See if that makes it any louder. Is that better for you guys? Is that better? Can you all hear me okay? Yep, there we go. Fabulous. Sorry about the little bit of quiet there. Hopefully this will be better. There we go. So we're looking obviously at what we can plan for, but also what we need to be able to put in place at short notice. So what's going on there? That's going the wrong way. Okay, let's try this again. So ProMed are looking for staff all over the UK. We are a growing company. We are getting more and more work. The reason why we didn't let you in the room until bang on 7 o'clock this evening was because I was just a little bit busy looking through a new inquiry for London and just making sure that we replied to our potential client very, very promptly. We are a living wage employer, so inside of London we'll pay £13.50 an hour. Outside of London we'll pay £11.75 an hour. We are a signatory to the Prompt Payment Code, which means we pay all of our suppliers, including our staff, within 30 days. And we're looking for first responders, so those with FREC 3 or higher, and emergency medical technicians, so those with FREC 4 or higher, to join our team. It's really easy. Just email apply@promed999.co.uk and we'll get you an application form sent out. At the moment, our growth area is within the film and TV sector, but like many other providers, we are aware that there are potentially events going to be happening across the UK next year. We're very cautious on that. We do have some provisional bookings in, but that is obviously highly COVID dependent. But we are very much looking forward to events restarting next year. Andrew, thank you for joining us for being on duty this evening. Thank you for those who are joining us from Ireland. Good to see so many rejoining faces as well as some new faces this evening. I'm sure many of you are aware that we do arrange for training courses through a QualSafe approved centre. They do a no quibble refund if the course is cancelled, and they do have a number of courses available. At the moment, we're operating out of Aylesbury. We can run courses anywhere in the UK if there's 4 or more of you, and there should be a new base opening in Rotherham in the very near future as well. So if you would like to do any kind of physical face-to-face training on the clinical side, do visit us at promed999.co.uk/training. You'll get the full details and the dates of them on there, but just to give you the highlights, FREC 3, which includes the level 3 administering medical gases, which covers the Entonox. That's £390. Our next course on weekdays will be on the 18th of January, Monday to Friday. We also do a weekend-only course, which is Saturdays and Sundays, beginning on the 13th of February, and that's 3 consecutive weekends. I'll give you a copy of Ambulance Care Essentials to keep from that course. Our next FREC 4 begins on the 23rd of January, running on weekends only. That's over 3 weekends, but those weekends are spaced out a little bit. And the reason for that is you have 3 workbooks to complete. When you do your FREC 4, QualSafe likes you to do them between your classroom blocks. So we run the course as QualSafe kind of sets as its standard. And you'll get a copy of Ambulance Care Practice if you do your course with us. Annually, everybody needs to be doing some kind of life support CPD. We offer the QualSafe Level 4 ILS for £150. It's a 1-day course. Next one going to be the 10th of January for us in Aylesbury, and you'll get the latest version of the Resource Council UK's ILS book to keep. And we are running a SARM course, Safe Administration of Life-Saving Medication, £200. We do, I believe, have 1 or 2 spaces left this weekend. If anybody wants to jump on that quickly, you will get a JR Calc pocket book to keep. Other than that, our next course will be, it's either late January or early February. All details are available on our website. If you want to book, go to the website, or really easy, training@promed999.co.uk, and we'll be in touch. So anyone attending any of our training courses, whether they are face-to-face, whether they are on Zoom, has the right to expect a space free from bullying, intimidation, harassment, and we want everybody to be treated with dignity, respect and courtesy and not be discriminated against. Therefore, we ask all of you to treat everybody with dignity, respect and courtesy. Happy to have disagreements, happy to have debates, as long as there is dignity, respect and courtesy shown while we're having those debates. Really good to be learning from each other. If you want to see our full code of conduct, have a little look on the link. And if you do need to report any inappropriate behaviour, please privately message admin team, or after the webinar, just email webinars@promed999.co.uk. So tonight, the things that we're going to be looking at are the environmental factors, the facilities that should be provided, vehicles, fire, dangerous substances, any special circumstances, and signage. We will make these slides and all of the notes available on the website after, and the video will be available on YouTube tomorrow. So first of all, let's have a little look at the environmental considerations. So whether we are on an event, whether we are on a film and TV set, whether we are rocking up to an incident, there's certain things that we need to be considering. And if we're not able to do this, then we need to be able to provide a suitable alternative, something that will do the very best for the welfare of our staff. So we need to make sure that wherever we're working is ventilated. So that could be with fresh air, it could be with purified air. So cab of an ambulance, you've got an air conditioning system. In an event scenario, you've got a gazebo. But if you're going to operate with all but one of those doors closed, the guys working in the back bay aren't actually going to be all that well ventilated. So we need to think about ensuring that there's going to be a through flow there if we're operating a large marquee. If we're operating in a porta cabin and we have to keep the external shutters closed for patient privacy, then we're probably not going to be very well ventilated in those rooms. And I see this time and time again on different event sites. You will see, you know, a one-door porta cabin, 20 foot long, and all of the side windows will be closed, and the door will usually be closed or slightly ajar because, you know, patient privacy. Well, that's all well and good, but how are you ventilating the space where your patients are? You know, we know that some of our patients will potentially have something infectious. How are we taking care of that ventilation? Better approach there is 3 metre high Harris fence, usually the same height as your porta cabins or coming not too far below, certainly window level. Scrim it off so that people can't see through. Open your shutters on your porta cabin, and that'll allow you to have the windows open. Or alternatively, you can open the windows slightly, open the shutters, and maybe use a bit of scrim across the shutters. If you kind of have them at sort of a 90 degree, you can then put some scrim across the front. That stops people being able to see in as well. Or you can order the porta cabins that have got some blinds on the inside, and that solves that problem as well. But time and time again, we do see this, and it is something that I do pick up on. When we place an order for porta cabins, we usually ask for the ones with blinds. Whether we use the blinds or not is immaterial, but at least we've given ourselves the option if we need it. When we're working with event site designers and the site crews, we ask sort of any areas that need to be private to have Harris and nice black or green, thick green scrim, which just makes it that bit more difficult for people to see in and gives us that kind of ventilation and space that we need. Temperature is another factor. I have seen medics be situated in marquees in winter events. That's not really all that good. The law actually says, and this is the workplace health and safety regulations of 1992 off the top of my head. It says that if the majority of the work is going to be sat down, it is 16 degrees is the minimum temperature that the employer must provide. It says if the person is going to be undertaking work which requires severe physical effort, then we can do that for 13 degrees C as the temperature in the workplace. Now, don't get me wrong, CPR, yep, that is severe physical effort, no question about it. Moving and handling patients, severe physical effort. But the majority of our work is not that. And as a standby medic on an event, we are definitely falling within the majority of the work sat down. We're not there where we are going to be
running around all day, every day. We are going to be sat waiting for our patients to come to us. That's the reality of the situation. There has been some cases where it's basically been proven that the majority of the work of a unit medic or an event medic is you are sat on standby. Certainly in ProMed, we have the expectation you'll use that sitting down time to do some CPD. So we need to make sure that we are providing a suitable temperature. Now, how we achieve that, there's very, very, very varied ways we can do that. If we get a porta cabin, for example, a lot of porta cabins have got kind of fixed electric heaters on the walls, so they're great. We can use fan heaters, we can use electric heaters, we can use gas heaters, we can use oil-filled radiators, whole host of things that we can do to provide a suitable temperature. But what's really important is that we don't have harmful fumes being produced. So if we are using, for example, a propane gas heater, we need to make sure that we are venting those propane fumes that may exist to atmosphere and not into the work environment. We also need to make sure that we are providing a means to verify that temperature. So we need to be providing a conventional thermometer that will measure the temperature of a room. That can obviously be thermostatically linked into the heating controls, depending on how sophisticated we want to get. But just a bog standard little wall thermometer, even the ones that have kind of got the little coloured squares that change colour, or different squares kind of change colour depending on the temperature. But we should be providing something so that our employees know what temperature their workplace is at. Depending on the time of year, we need to be making sure that we're choosing kind of suitable accommodation just to make sure that we're able to do that. If you've tried heating a marquee in the middle of winter, you'll realise it's not that easy. It requires significant amounts of energy, whereas a porta cabin, if we're not expecting a large volume of casualties, is much more suitable. Alternatively, we could have a mixture of the two, in that staff who aren't actively needed can be in the much warmer environment of the porta cabin, and then we can maintain the marquee at a bit of a lower temperature, which just makes our life that little bit easier. Lighting is another key factor. So if we're operating solely within daylight, and there is absolutely no way at all that we could ever operate where there is no daylight, then natural light is going to be absolutely ideal. But the nature of our work is that we don't necessarily know that we are only ever going to be working in daylight. What if that film and TV set overruns and it's suddenly night? What if we get a patient 5 minutes before the end of an event and we're going to be managing them for an hour or so, waiting for them to be collected by the appropriate adult? So if there is even the slightest chance that we could go into darkness, we need to be looking at providing artificial lighting. Again, this is where good working relationships with site crews and event managers, or the gaffer on the film and TV set comes in. We need to make sure that we have that. We need to make sure that it's suitable and it's sufficient. So think about the things that we would do in a first aid post. If all we're doing is jumping up and down on the chest, well, we don't only need a crude source of light. If, however, we're going to be doing a BM, if we're going to be examining small injuries, see if there's any foreign objects in there, then we're going to need a much brighter source of light. So we need to think about what we're doing and how much light is required to carry that task out safely. And if we're providing any artificial lighting, we need to ensure that there is an emergency lighting source. Now, on some events, it might well be in the marquee, that could be a torch. It may well be that the generator is backed up by a standby generator, in which case that's also taking care of your emergency lighting needs because it is a full standby. It might be that if it's porta cabin and it is plugged in, then is there something else that can be plugged into on a totally different circuit? Ideally, automatic changeover is what you want, but on temporary events, having a manual changeover position where you have another power source readily available, it just requires somebody unplugging one connection and plugging in another, would be fine. You can get around needing an emergency backup simply by providing your artificial lighting from two different circuits in the first place. So if you've got one generator that's powering half of your marquee with light and another generator that's powering the other half of your marquee, we've already covered yourself because one supply is different to the other supply. We need to be looking at the cleanliness of our environment. Now, that could be our responsibility, and actually within the first aid post, it absolutely is our responsibility. Unless we have specialist cleaners, they're not going to know what's clinical waste, what's treatable, what's sharp, what can go into the ordinary waste streams in terms of your recyclable and your non-recyclable or your food waste. So we need to kind of be looking after our own waste. So first of all, we need to make sure that we have suitable containers for that. So sharps, obviously, we have sharps containers. We have some kind of yellow or orange receptacle for the clinical and treatable waste. And we have some sort of clear bag, black bag, or coloured bag, depending on what the waste policies of the event or production that we're working on is. And we need to make sure that that doesn't accumulate. So that is, when the bags are getting a little bit full, that they are being taken away. They're not just being dumped in a pile on the floor and then left together. They need to be removed from the immediate work environment into a suitable storage area, pending their ultimate disposal. Obviously, we need registered waste carriers to take away the waste. We need to make sure that there is somewhere where that waste can be stored until the registered waste carrier can come and collect it. Alternatively, as a registered lower tier waste carrier, you can remove your own waste, but again, you're still going to have to store it somewhere because you're not going to go for a drive every time there's a new rubbish bag gets changed. We also need to be making sure that the furniture, furnishings, and fittings are kept clean. So as a medical provider, we should be very good at this. We should be Clinell wiping all of our stretchers, our beds, our monitors, our bags, our observations kit, every single time we use it. But we also need to make sure that the table where our equipment's being put is getting regularly wiped. We need to be making sure that the kettle in the welfare area is getting cleaned. We need to make sure that the mugs and the teaspoons that we're making our brews with are getting cleaned as well. Any surface, any wall, any floor, any ceiling needs to be cleaned. So medical facilities, unless they are very, very temporary in nature, should have some kind of floor. You can't clean grass. Tried it, doesn't work. Just, still grass at the end of the day, still mud. You try and wash it with water, you just get mud. Don't recommend it. So that could be, wooden floor, that could be a plastic floor. It could just be a ground sheet. But we need something that we can clean. And the other reason we actually need it is to contain any spillages. So blood technically is waste as far as we're concerned. So it can have adverse environmental effects. So we need to make sure that that's contained, not going to contaminate the external environment. Our walls and our ceilings need to also be cleaned. So, we use some pop-up tents. Before we pop them away, we will make sure that all of the internal surfaces and the external surfaces get Clinelled. So, while it's fully up, do everything, then bring it down, do the top, go around the outside, do the top. Make sure that it's clean before it's put away. If it's a multi-day event, then we might well lower it between the days and we'll give it a good clean as well. Anything like that, we just need to make sure that we're absolutely on top of the cleaning. We're not allowing any kind of dirt, any dust, any debris, any stains to be gathering. Stay on top of that. It is part of a safe and healthy work environment. So what facilities do we need to be looking at providing for our employees? So there's a number of these. Let's see who can have a guess. What facilities do we need to provide for our employees? Throw something up in the chat for me. Okay, the rotter's gone for the easy one. We've gone for toilets there. So sanitary conveniences is how it's worded in UK law. Chris Halls gave me toilets, clean drinking water and a break area. Neil O'Gorman's expanded on that by saying somewhere to eat food. He's also said hand washing. Anybody else got anything that we may have missed? There are two more things. Protection from the elements? Yes and no. There's two more things that we're missing in terms of our facilities. Anybody know what they might be? Heating, we've just covered in environment. There we go, Stuart, the changing area. And if we've got a changing area and privacy, what do we need to have there? So what we're going to have in our private changing area? Anybody want to have a guess at that? Showers are not a requirement. There you go, Stuart. You've got it. Lockers and storage. So let's talk through these. So we need to have sanitary conveniences, and they need to include washing facilities, which we maintain in a clean and orderly condition. And there needs to, wherever practical, be separate rooms for men and women. So your porta john, your plastic potty, whatever you want to call it, they do tend to meet the bill because they have an inbuilt sink. They are kept clean and orderly, usually by your site team, and they are entirely separate cubicles. Floor to ceiling, absolutely covered door. So they are meeting the definition of being a separate rooms for men and women. Washing facilities, ideally, being a medical provider, we want fresh, hot potable water with liquid soap and hand towels. That's the gold standard. Recirc heated water is probably the next best thing. Hand sanitizer is probably way down at the bottom of the list. But yeah, if we can get flowing hot water or recirc hot water, that's going to be the ideal. It should be something that we're requesting from our events and from our productions if we're doing this on a temporary basis. Drinking water, so a source of potable water or a supply of drinking water, however that is provided, is down to circumstances. So it may be that, on some events, we will make a trip to Costco and we will buy, crates of 500ml bottled water at something like 2 or 3 pence a bottle. And we'll just have heaps of that stacked in a corner out the way. We are currently looking at providing all of our staff with branded drinking bottles, and we're going to move to having the big 5-litre containers just to reduce our plastic waste. It may be that we're on a larger site and we've got plumbing facilities and we use the plumbing, whether that's fixed or temporary. But we need to make sure that there is potable water that our staff can use. Now, obviously, as a medical provider, we're going to make sure that courtesy is extended to our patients. So single-use disposable cups there are probably in order for the patients, especially with COVID at the moment. Outside of COVID, we would probably look to use reusables and make sure that we have a facility for washing them with hot water properly. But in COVID, certainly at the moment, that should be single-use throwaway for the patients. We need to be providing rest facilities. So those rest facilities are somewhere where we can take the weight off our feet, plonk our backsides down, have a bit of a rest. If we're providing work for people over 6 hours in duration, we are legally obligated to give them a 20-minute rest period. And that 20-minute rest period therefore requires a rest facility. The rest facility is from the 1992 regs. The requirement for the 20-minute uninterrupted period of rest came in from the Working Time Directive in 2008. So therefore the facilities are the more important, and therefore because the rest break came afterwards, that was the point at which the rest facilities absolutely started to get looked at. So those rest facilities, there needs to be a place to store food if the work environment is of a place where it wouldn't be suitable to have food with the worker. So all of our facilities meet that definition. We cannot have food in clinical areas for 2 reasons. 1, it can contaminate the patient. 2, because the patients can contaminate it. So we need to make sure that we are providing suitable space to store food. We have a number of small fridges that we use. We plug them in, make sure they're nice and cold, so when the staff arrive, they can chuck their little butty box in there. We also have some boxes that staff can leave stuff in that have got lids to keep the pests out, because again, it's no good just saying leave it on that table if it's in a marquee and the fox can get in at night and eat it all for you. So we need to make sure that whatever we are providing in terms of storing that is going to actually be safe in terms of food hygiene as well. We also need to remember the Equality Act of 2010, and we need to make sure that we're not discriminating here. So pregnant women, they will require suitable and adequate rest facilities. So if they're sat down on a particular chair all day for their day job, they might well want to, lean back, recline a little bit, stretch out a bit, walk around a bit. Different pregnant women have different kind of wants, especially different parts of their pregnancy, and we need to make sure that we're accounting for that within their rest. Nursing mothers, so those who are breastfeeding, they will potentially require a place where they are able to express milk. Not necessarily saying bring your baby to work, but they may need to express milk, and they will need somewhere where they can then store that expressed milk until the end of their shift. That's very important, and we need to make sure that there's a private area for them to do so. We need to provide lockers. So the rules for lockers and also the rules for changing rooms are activated if the worker's own clothing is not worn during working hours, or they have special clothing that is not taken home. So quite often, our staff will turn up in a particular uniform already. But if we are providing T-shirts or polo shirts for them to wear, we need to provide changing facilities which are separate for men and for women. We need to provide somewhere where they are able to store whatever T-shirt they are taking off while they wear ours. If we are telling them they need to travel in a coat that covers the branding on their uniform, then we need to provide somewhere secure that they can leave their personal coat. If we're not allowing people to have their handbags or their wallet or their personal possessions on shift, we need to provide a suitable place where that can be locked. Now, in an ideal world, that will obviously be an individual locker, and ProMed does have a small number of those that sometimes go up to our larger events. But it can be a secure place where only our staff have access. Preferably that's going to be somewhere that's monitored, or where senior staff are going to be based, but not always. If the key is controlled and only our staff are ever given the key, it is going to meet the definition. That can also be separate from the changing area. You don't have to get changed where your lockers are. It's good practice, but that's not actually specifically a requirement. And then we need to look at the doors and the gates. So do they need safety devices? Can they be opened easily from the inside? Can they be locked securely to prevent unauthorized access from the outside? That's all part of facilities as well. We've got one of the more obvious hazards next, so vehicles. So thinking about what we do, what are the very obvious hazards with vehicles, and what control measures do we need to have in place? Throw some ideas in the chat, let's have a think. So Neil's kicking us off there with banking. Dorota's telling us that we could be run over. Anybody else got any other hazards or any control measures that could be useful? Separating vehicles and pedestrians. We've got drugs on an ambulance clinical kit, and therefore they have to be secure vehicles as per the, you've said CQC regulations. One would argue that the drugs that are kept on some ambulances, the Misuse of Drugs Act 1971 and the Human Medicine Regulations of 2012 are slightly more relevant. CQC can say what they want, but if you've got some Class A or Schedule 2s knocking about on your ambulance, they're going to trump the CQC, especially if Prod comes a knocking. Hello there, can I have some of your morphine, please? Righty, so most important thing is segregation of pedestrians and vehicles. We see this all the time. You have a very nice blue route between your first aid post and the wider world, and staff are walking on it between the outside world and the first aid post. That's not segregating pedestrians and vehicles. The walking route comes through usually the front door, the same as the patient's, or we might have a side door where we're camping on an event. But we can't be walking down the blue route. And yes, we do put it in our briefings quite explicitly. No pedestrians on the blue route. We've covered ourselves there. We've met people who've done it. It's just a big no-no. Vehicles on blue routes tend to have blue flashy lights if they're in a hurry. They're not expecting pedestrians to be there. It's slowing down that patient journey or slowing down that response time. because they're almost having to come to a stop while they pass that pedestrian. It's not a good situation to be in. Please don't do it. So we need to make sure as well, the back of the first aid post or the door that we're going to move a patient on a stretcher to an ambulance, we need to make sure, especially if we're involved in the design, especially if it's a marquee and it's temporary, we need to make sure that we've thought about segregating pedestrians and vehicles. These are very, very, very busy areas. Now, some of the best things that I've seen at hospitals is the sleeping policeman that runs the full width of the ambulance bay, and it stops well clear of the pavement. In fact, it stops around about a ramp's length away from the back of the ambulance to the pavement. That's ideal because it means that nobody who's on the pavement is at risk of being hit by a moving vehicle, because there's still about 3 foot of extra room between the bumper of that vehicle and the line that delineates pavement to road. And again, a raised curb so that you know you're stepping off onto a road, or a bump or some kind of tactile paving there, making it obvious that you're on that delineating line. At the end of the day, when your ramp comes down, then your patient, doesn't matter if there's a curb or a bump, because you go from the ramp to the ambulance and the pavement. There's no need to worry about those bumps and curbs and delineating kind of features. I've seen some areas that have got barriers as well, directing people round the side of the ambulance bay, so the designated walking route around the edge of the hospital, to stop people from kind of running through the gaps between the ambulances. And we need to take those principles and we need to apply them to, you know, the area at the back of the marquee where our 4 or 5 ambulances are parked. Now, you know, ask very nicely, and I'm sure that the Sparks will have some nice thick cable ramps that they're not using. Get a line of them up and you know, work out, get your ambulances parked. You know, you want a good stretcher distance twice over from where the ramp ends to where the back of your marquee is, because you've got to think, to get the stretcher off, it needs to be clear of the ramp. You then need to maneuver it to get it in your marquee. And you've got to have people at the head and the tail. So twice the stretcher length from the back of your ramp to the door of your marquee. So once you've got your ambulance lined up there, make sure the handbrake is on, make sure the keys are out of the ignition, and stick the first 2 cable ramps against the wheels. When you've done that, move the ambulance out of the way, and then do a full line of cable ramps across the full area of your loading area. That way, any driver coming up simply just needs to wait until they feel that little bump. The other thing is, if you're running a fleet of identical ambulances, and obviously a lot of companies are these days, what you do is when you've identified that, you then go and put a stick at the front in line with the wing mirror so that your driver is watching for that stick as well. And you'll put a stick at either side. You might put some little flashy lamps pointing sort of straight in. So it's really obvious, even at night, when you're getting close to that bump and you don't actually need to touch the bump. If you've got a fleet of identical vehicles, that's a really good way to do it. And it's keeping it segregated as well. So the only people who should be going into the area between the marquee and the ambulance are those who are actively moving a stretcher. That can be with or without patient, of course, but they need to be actively involved in moving that stretcher, or they are returning to their own vehicle. Nobody else needs to be out in that area, because if you are, you're simply increasing the risk of a collision. So minimize that. Have a separate staff entrance into the back area. Ideally, Harris fence off or PED barrier off the areas where your vehicles are going to be maneuvering, especially when they're going to be doing that swing to reverse back to your loading area. That area needs to be completely devoid of pedestrians, and the more physical infrastructure we can put between the pedestrian and the vehicle, ultimately the safer it's going to be. Banksmen, banks people would be nice, and the Rot has absolutely said high-vis vests. So any kind of manoeuvring or any vehicles above 30 miles an hour, you need class 3 high visibility clothing as far as EN 471 goes, and that is long sleeves. You cannot be stood marshalling a vehicle in black sleeves and your high vis tabard. because this area of your arm where you're going this way or I want you to come back, if you're wearing black sleeves, it's simply not visible. You need to be in full length sleeved high vis for those signals to be clearly visible. It's good protocol to be wearing that during the day as well as in reduced visibility, of course. And we need to consider our traffic routes, and we don't just mean vehicular traffic routes here as well. We also mean the pedestrian traffic routes. You know, pedestrian traffic is traffic. So again, which routes are our patients coming in? Which routes are our relatives and family and friends going to use? Which routes are our staff going to use? Which routes are our vehicles going to use? And we need to try and keep all of them streams as separate as possible if we can. So blue route is an obvious traffic route that is vehicular only, and it's fairly much first in, post to outside world. No interruptions, no diversions, no options. It's there's your way in and out. And obviously there'll be a backup to that. What about how's the vehicle going to get around the rest of the event site? How is it going to be kept safe from pedestrians? What about the patient in the arena? What's going to be done there? Which access gates are we going to use? How close can we bring the ambulance? Do we have a way of creating a temporary traffic route? Do we have barrier tape and pins that are ready to roll out? Do we have PED barrier that can be moved quickly in little caches around the site? What have we got that can help us create temporary traffic routes? If we plan for that in advance, then actually it's really easy, because if you've got an area that's not massively busy with pedestrians, but you do have the ones bimbling through, but you've got a steward team that's on response that you can ask to go and grab that barrier from that location, that barrier from that location, just clear out this area for me, please. Job done. You've then got a route from your gate straight into where your patient is. I always keep barrier tape wherever I've got a cache of PED barrier, because I can then do PED barrier, gap, PED barrier, gap, and then just fill in those gaps with 2 lines of barrier tape. As long as it's stewarded and you've got people making sure people don't run under the barrier tape, you're absolutely fine. Chris, yep, the airport ping pong bats, especially those airport ping pong bats with the orange LEDs in them, just to make it even more obvious. Personally, I've got a multicolored torch. If I just turn it on, it's a red lamp. If I put my finger on one side, it is an amber lamp, and if I put my finger on the other side, it's a green lamp. As soon as I let go of any of those, it goes back to red. So I will usually use a green lamp, and I'll do my waving with my green lamp, knowing that if my finger slips or something goes wrong, it goes back to red lamp, and I've already had the conversation with the driver. If it goes red, stop what you're doing. It might mean that I'm aware of something. It might mean that I'm daydreaming. But whatever it is, red just means stop. And again, just that motion of the visible lamp makes it really good for drivers, because you can clearly see what the indication of the hands are in darkness. So that's vehicles, because vehicles are a really obvious hazard that everybody knows about. One that we tend to not pay too much attention to in medical world, unfortunately, is the very real hazard of fire. So we've got the fire triangle. So who would like to remind us what the fire triangle is? Throw in the chat the 3 sides of the fire triangle, please. Okay, I've got fuel, I've got heat, I've got fuel, I've got oxygen, I've got temperature, I've got oxygen, I've got oxygen, I've got fuel, I've got heat, I've got O2. So absolutely, fuel is essential. There needs to be something that can burn, or if we're going to be scientific about it, there needs to be something that can combust. There needs to be oxygen. Now, we are a medical provider. We provide lots and lots and lots of oxygen. That's readily available in our environment. Our blankets are a source of fuel. Some of our dressings are a source of fuel. The paper packaging that a lot of things come in are a source of fuel. The wooden tables that keep cropping up in marquees are a source of fuel. Some of the flimsy gazebos are a source of fuel. Can everybody see where we're going with this? We have the oxygen, and we are also supplying the fuel. And then there's heat. So heat is the other side of the fire triangle. Now that heat can be instantaneous, like a spark that is creating a lot of thermal energy in a very short space, a very short period of time. But that heat is what is needed. And obviously, most combustion is then self-sustaining. It's an exothermic reaction, which means the reaction gives off heat. So once combustion has been initiated, that combustion then self-sustains. So we need to be able to detect this. We need to be able to identify that a fire is taking place. Now, that can be automatic fire detection. We could have smoke alarms. We could have flamed alarms. We could have heat alarms. That could be manual. That could be that there is always somebody in the first aid post and they are going to walk around every 15 minutes and they're going to check every single part of that first aid post to make sure that nothing's untoward, make sure that there's no sign of any smoke, any fire, make sure that all the gas is switched off, that's not in use, and so on and so forth. Preferably, an automated system is ideal. What's to stop you putting a smoke alarm in at the top of your gazebo or in your porta cabin? There's nothing at all. A couple of sticky pads will hold most cheap battery-operated smoke detectors. It's great that we've got the detectors. We also need to be able to raise the alarm. And again, these can be automated or they can be manual. Automated is, again, preferable. And we don't mean automated as in a full building fire alarm here. We mean automated as in you do one action and it will then sustain the alarm. So there are quite a lot of site fire alarms available for around about 20 to 30 pounds, some of which you can link together just using 2-core cable. And it's basically you either pull something out or you press something and the audible siren continues. Yeah, there's a really cheap way of doing it. It is cheap and nasty, and we do it sometimes. Rape alarms. You can pick up a rape alarm for about 3 or 4 quid, a couple of AA batteries, and at the bottom it's got that little metal pin. You pull the pin out and the siren just keeps going. So what we tend to do is we tend to put some like red cord on that reaches all the way to the floor, or some high vis cord. We put a mark on that says, in the event of a fire, pull cord. We'll obviously attach the cord to the alarm in some way, shape or form so they don't get permanently separated. But point being, all someone needs to do is just go yank. And that's it. That alarm then sounds. They don't need to continually shout fire, fire, fire. They don't need to continually blow a whistle. But, they are perfectly acceptable manual ways of raising the alarm. But what we need ideally is something that is going to be self-sustaining. And that alarm needs to be audible anywhere that fire can spread to, which is why the interlinked ones are quite good, especially for the larger marquees. Alarm needs to be next to any main final exit. So for your marquee, anywhere you've designated an emergency exit, anywhere you are using as a normal entrance and exit, needs to have that kind of alarm available. If you're using whistles as alarms, not only should you be providing them to every person, you should also have a spare whistle next to every exit point. Again, you need to have some kind of sign there in case of fire, blow this whistle. I do prefer the electronic ones though. We need to have means of extinguishing it. Now, we are introducing fuel and oxygen into the environment. We are providing the risk of fire. As far as the Regulatory Reform Fire Safety Order of 2005 goes, our most senior person who is there setting up the first aid post will be deemed the responsible person. They are responsible for our activities. They are responsible for the safety of our staff. They are responsible for the safety of our patients insofar as the reform order goes. So we need to make sure that we have a means of extinguishing that fire. The cheap and easy answer to tell everybody is get a 6 kilo ABC dry powder, get a 9 kilo AFFF foam, stick them next to each other, and that's going to cover every eventuality. ABC dry powder can be used on electrical, and AFFF foam can be used on your kind of flammable liquids and your combustible solids. You could alternatively use a 9 litre AFFF and a 2 kilo CO2. That'll again cover most of your eventualities. Your CO2 is great for your gases and your electricals, but jack all else. And if you don't use it in a confined space, it's like pissing in the wind, to be totally honest with you. It just goes everywhere and you get the backlash. CO2 displaces oxygen. you can't displace the 21% oxygen in the open air. Just going to throw that out there. I have seen people try. I look at them and I go, that's a waste of an extinguisher. 40 quid bill for you. It just don't work. It's great for inside a marquee. It's great for inside a little gazebo. It's great for inside a porta cabin. It's no use anywhere else. Don't put it in your ambulance loading bay. It's not going to work. ABC dry powder is your kind of gold standard. However, ABC dry powder will ruin all of your cardiac monitors. It will ruin all of your observations kit. It's going to be a bitch to get out of all of your kit bags. Anything that's open nearby is going to be ruined for life. If you've got a gust of wind, it's going into your mouth. And not forgetting that you're going to be covered in pink dust yourself. So whilst the ABC dry powder will put anything out, and it will put it out in the open air, it's at serious cost. AFFF, so aqueous film forming foam, that can be used theoretically up to 1000 volts. So your standard sort of power supplies at most events and in most areas is going to be either 230 volts single phase or 415 volts 3-phase. So you can theoretically use it. Personally, I would, but it is essentially a water medium. It's just the fact that the foam is insulating, but it is still a water medium. We know that water conducts electricity, and you're going to be holding a great big metal can full of it. So not ideal. So be wary if you have to, but can be used certainly on the low voltage things. Just obviously used with caution. The way that works is twofold. Firstly, the water is a cooling agent, so that's removing the heat from the fire Secondly, the film forming foam cuts off the supply of oxygen from the top. So if you're using AFFF, you need to be aiming it ever so slightly above the fire. So you're not aiming for the middle where you're going to send the fire everywhere. Aim it slightly above, and then you work from you away. And what you're trying to do is you're trying to get the water to kind of land on the fire, but you're also trying to get that foam to kind of get a nice blanket of foam across the top. We don't use water fire extinguishers because foam is just so much better than plain water. Quid more, if even that. My servicing agent does me an excellent deal on refills. I'm not actually sure what he charges me for the foam because he buys it in bulk, but I'm sure I am only paying pennies more with him. But water, if you do have them, you aim them at the base of the fire, so you're trying to get the water in as low as possible, because the only thing water can do is remove the heat. It can't do anything about the oxygen or the fuel. Carbon dioxide only treats the oxygen. ABC dry powder interacts with the fuel. It also partially cuts off the oxygen, and it does nothing for the heat. So that's how they all work. There are other fire extinguishers available, so if you are using specialist things, speak to a specialist fire risk assessor who will provide you with the right advice on the right extinguishing media that you need. And of course, we shouldn't forget fire blankets. So fire blankets can go over anything. They can go over people. They can be wrapped around people. For that reason, we only ever buy the 1.8 by 1.8 meters. Because we know they can potentially be used on people. And the way it works is you pull the tabs down, you hold the tabs up so it tabs down and then straight up above your head height, and then you walk towards the flames holding the tabs as far apart as possible. If that's to another person, it's 1 around, 2 around, and then throw them down to the floor and tell them to roll. If they're rolling in the fire blanket, the flames can't then rise. This is what we see quite often when you tell people stop, drop, roll. What happens is they're rolling on the floor, but the flames are still rising because we've not actually cut them off. So stop, drop, wrap and roll is the slightly better acronym there. If we can do the wrapping as we throw them to the ground, then we're using the correct thing. We're still minimizing the risk to ourselves because obviously the fire blanket's designed to protect us. It's exactly the same fire blanket that you would use on your chip pan fire, where you walk towards your chip pan fire with your arms outstretched and put it over. Again, fire blanket's only going to do one thing. It's only going to cut off that supply of oxygen. Again, sounds stupid, but let's just say it. In the event of a fire, we need to be turning off all of our oxygen cylinders by their main valve, not just the fir tree valve. They all need to be isolated on the cylinder main valve. And if it is at all possible, we need to remove all compressed gas cylinders from the vicinity of the fire. There is no point in trying to put out a fire and somebody's leaving a great big oxygen supply feeding it. It's just going to make your job so much harder, and it's also going to potentially allow that fire to reignite. So if you've managed to get most of the fire out, but it's still a little bit smouldering, you can guarantee if someone's left the oxygen on, that smouldering fire is then going to become a full fire again. So if we can, get the oxygen, get the NOx, get any other compressed gas cylinders out of the way. If the fire brigade turn up and we've not managed to do any of that, we absolutely need to be telling them quite early on, we have compressed gas cylinders, this is where they are. They are turned on, they are turned off, they are connected to this system, they are not connected to the system. Whatever the situation is, we need to be briefing the incoming fire team as to what we've got. Not only do they need to know that because it's going to affect their ability to fully extinguish the fire, they also need to know that there's potentially some missiles that are going to be launched at their heads or their bodies, and that could render them unconscious while they're fighting the fire. Once fire team know that there are compressed gas cylinders, usually they will prioritize cooling them down over and above dealing with the fire, because unless they're getting cool, they don't know that they're going to have safety for their staff. And the last part of fire that we need to talk about is evacuation. So again, it's great having detected a fire, it's great having raised the alarm, but we need to think about evacuation. That's not just how we're going to get our staff out, how we're going to get our patients out. If they're on stretchers, can they very easily be moved? Can they be removed from the fire area without needing to pass through the fire? Is there 2 or more exits 45 degrees apart? Can we get to the outside world in a total distance of less than 30 meters? Can we evacuate within less than 1 minute? All important questions. If we can't, then we need to be looking at legislation. We need to be paying a lot of attention to the best practice guidance, and we need to be making sure that we comply with the exemptions, the adaptations, and the approved codes of practice that are in place. But essentially, it's 45-degree angle between 2 separate exits from any particular point. Fire extinguishers every 30 meters and next to every main final exit. No more than 30 meters from any single point to the main final exit, and evacuation time from any single point less than 60 seconds. If you can do that, you don't need to worry. If you can't do that, then you need to go and read the legislation carefully. It's a subject in itself, and I don't really want to go too deep into that tonight. As a medical provider, we're going to be using dangerous substances. So what dangerous substances can you think of that we will have as a medical provider that we need to be making arrangements for? A patient isn't a substance, Chris. Dorota, drugs, Neil, sharps, any more from anybody? Yep, we've got clinical waste. I'm still thinking of 2 more really obvious ones. Patient records aren't dangerous substances. We've got waste, gases, biohazards. Yep, all of them. Still missing a really obvious thing that counts as a dangerous substance. And we alluded to it when we were talking about environment. Not the toilets. Okay, the one that everybody's missed is cleaning chemicals. So bleach, anything like sodium hydroxide that we might use. If we're cleaning pipelines or anything carrying a liquid, we may use peracetic acid. Obviously, storing peracetic acid next to bleach is a big no-no. So let's look at what we've got to do. We've got to store it, we've got to fill it, or we've got to empty it, we've got to transport it, and we've got to label it. So first of all, when we're looking at storage, the obvious things is we need to make sure that however we store our dangerous substances, and by that I mean our medical gases, I mean our cleaning chemicals, and I mean our clinical or sharp waste, that needs to be stored where it is not able to be stolen, where it is not available for an opportunistic arsonist, and where any spillage would be suitably contained. In terms of filling and emptying, we need to make sure that the filling and emptying of whatever containers we're using doesn't pose a risk to our staff. One of my favourites is peracetic acid, seeing people do that in closed containers. Peracetic acid can vaporize, and peracetic acid should not be ingested or breathed in. If it's vaporizing, you're breathing it in. So peracetic acid should really only ever be prepared in concentrate form in the open air. It's commonly used in bars, and they often will use concentrated peracetic acid in a cellar, pouring it out of a bottle into a bigger bottle and then adding the water. Two things wrong with that. Firstly, when they pour the concentrate into the empty bottle, it's going to potentially vaporize. Secondly, when they add water to it, it's going to potentially vaporize. Same goes for bleach. Bleach, you probably would want to be inhaling it, so you therefore don't want to be pouring concentrated bleach between containers if you can avoid that indoors. Whether we're using other alkalis for, say, our mops to do our floors, or if we're mixing up spray solutions ourselves, then anything that we're using, particularly concentrated, we need to be thinking about where we're emptying them. And by emptying, I just mean leaving a container. Yes, we're going to be using it straight away, but we're still emptying a container, and that has hazards. We shouldn't be doing it in an uncontrolled or an uncontained environment, if we're going to be quite specific there, because if we spill it, if we are knocked while we're holding that container, what's going to happen to that chemical? It's going to go everywhere. We need to make sure that that wouldn't happen, that it is contained. And likewise, we certainly refill some of our things ourselves from concentrate. So we need to make sure that, again, are we using funnels? Are we doing it over a sink or a basin so that anything that is spilt is going to be contained or treated before it's disposed of? We need to make sure that we're doing that in the open air if it's anything that we wouldn't want to be breathing in. We need to think about firefighting. So wherever we're storing it, what firefighting options have we got? So if we're going to put a cage of medical gases somewhere, have we also considered putting some ABC dry powder fire extinguishers next to it? Do we have a supply of water available? And I'm thinking here a plumbed water supply, so that if it starts to get hot, we can cool them down quickly. We're looking at security. So if we are going to create a cage of medical gases, have we remembered to also put some panels of Harris fence on the top? It's no good creating a 3x3 Harris fence compound and clipping it all up if we leave the roof exposed, because anybody can just jump the fence, grab the oxygen, jump back out. Put the roof on, tie it down on the roof as well. Again, these sound really obvious. You'll be surprised what's missed. Do we need a floor? Do we need a secure floor? Depending on the environment, you might well want a secure floor, because if you've got 4 people who can lift up the 4 corners of your Harris fence, then you haven't got a secure cage. You've got something that somebody's tipped over. So if you're making anything temporary for storage, just think about what can an idiot do and make sure that you beat the idiot. And then we need to make sure our compatibility of materials. So in terms of dangerous substances, we tend to be looking here at oxygen and NOx being regarded as oxidizing agents. By an oxidizing agent in this context, I don't mean in the chemical sense of has the ability to change electron numbers. I mean more in the sense of can provide oxygen if something happens to its container. In that strict sense, oxygen and NOx would be an oxidizing agent. If they lost their containment, they would provide oxygen, which would increase combustion. So they can't be stored next to pretty much anything that can combust. There needs to be a separate distance of non-combustible material. Dry grass, by the way, is combustible. So either dig a trench of mud or wet your grass and keep it wet. Make sure that there is that combustion-free zone around wherever you're storing your oxygen, your NOx. Even an empty cylinder may still have a small amount of gas in, and it can still explode if heated. So don't think that an empty cylinder needs to be treated any differently to a full one. Other common ones are things like your bleaches, your chlorates, your sodium hydroxides, and your acids that are all used in cleaning. Window cleaners, which is usually some sort of acetic acid, need to be kept separate from all of your other cleaning chemicals, which are your bleaches, your chlorates, and your hydroxides, because acids and alkalis will react together. That can be exothermic. Now, I know we're only talking small quantities, but a small quantity of an exothermic reaction next to a pile of, sun-dried cardboard could be enough to then have a cardboard fire, which then gets big enough to ignite something else, which is next to your gas storage area, which is then supplying the oxygen, which is then accidents and incidents are never just one thing. They are a chain of critical events. If you remove one link, if you break one link, the chain isn't there and the accident doesn't happen the way it did. So just making sure that we are keeping all of these materials separate is just one more link in the chain that we've broken. Labeling, so ideally we keep things in our original containers. If we are going to put them into containers, if we're going to dilute down some cleaning product into a spray bottle ready to spray, have we labeled that original bottle, that new bottle with the name of the chemical that's gone into it, the dilution factor, the date it was prepared, who prepared it, have we also copied across the hazard symbols now? Certainly when I was a student in school and college, we would get given a beaker of a liquid and it would just have a quick scribble on, ETOH, meaning ethanol, and that's all we'd get. These days, speaking as a teacher, and obviously required to abide by these, if we give ethanol, it is always given in a closed container, and it'll have a printed or a sort of block letter label saying ethanol, and it will also say C2H5OH on it, and it will always have the flame symbol stuck on, the little stickers you can get nowadays. It will always have that stuck on to show what its hazard classification is. Even if we're giving 10 mil to a student, that container will still have a small flame label attached to it, because we need to know the hazard. Whatever we pick up, if it's hazardous, we need to know that that has a hazard. So whatever we are doing in our companies, if we are transferring anything from an original container, we need to replicate the vital information, and we need to make sure that the hazards is absolutely transferring across. It's also good practice to keep the COSH data sheets, or the MSDS, the material safety data sheets, with the materials or the chemicals or the compounds or whatever it is involved, or certainly have them accessible on a shared drive, or have them in hard copy in a folder and everyone knows where that folder is, so that if there is anything that happens, if something does go wrong, you've got immediate access to it, or if somebody wants to do something, they can always refer to it before they use it. Just check, do I need to be ventilated? Do I need to wear a particular type of gloves, or is my normal nitrile gloves going to be good? Lockable sluice room or secured area is very good for storing all of this. And if we're transporting them, there's particular labeling involved in transport. So whenever I go to BOC and I get some oxygen NOx, I will always get supply advice. It will always confirm that I have less than 200 litres liquid volume of container. It will also tell me the dangerous goods classification. It will give me the United Nations 4-digit code number for the chemical that is there. It will also give me the ADR 2- or 3-digit number signifying the dangerous goods code. And that will be on the piece of paper that I always get from BOC, even though I've been plenty of times before, and I have oxygen in my car pretty much all the time. I always have that there, but that's great. That's what we want. And Yeah, we get that all the time. So if we are transporting things, I tend to have a spare copy of that box supply advice in my car because I've always got oxygen in my car, so I always find it handy to have. And that labeling then brings us on nicely to the signage. So signage is not something that we just do and hope for the best. That's not how we manage risk. So signage is always in addition to the different control measures. Signage is there to convey a simple message. It is standardized. So there is ideally no words on it. If we don't have words, then language is not a barrier. It is pictorial, it is symbol, it is things that are going to be very easily understood, even by people who can't read or people who don't speak English. So who can tell me what the standardized safety signs are? There are 4 of them. So what are they? Bonus points for anybody who can tell me what they look like. Do not enter looks like a road sign. Danger of life, danger environment, oxidation agent, oxygen or gases, triangles, electrical hazard. So we're all giving me lots of good examples of safety signs. But what are the 4 groups of safety signs and what do they look like? Electrical hard, Chris. I don't want to know what you mean by an electrical hard, if I'm honest. Hazard, oh, that's so much better. So diamond shape. So let's go through them then, seeing as we're getting a little bit stuck. So we have a prohibition sign. So a prohibition sign is always red. It means do not, it means must not. It basically means don't do it. They are red. They can be entirely red, red background, or they can be red with a line through the middle. The other permissible colours on red are white and black. White's your background, black is any other imagery. We have a mandatory sign. So a mandatory sign is a blue sign. Mandatory means must do. It means you have to do it. So we use the blue signs to mean wear PPE. We use them to mean safety boots mandatory. We mean that you must carry a radio. Whatever it is, mandatory or on blue. Safe condition signs are in green. So safe condition, they're the signs that point to exits. They're the signs that mark out your assembly points. They're the signs that tell you where your muster points are on ships. They're the signs that tell you to leave something in a particular place. It is a safe condition. It is somewhere you are safe, or it is directing you to somewhere you will be safe. And then we have warning signs. So warning signs are yellow. They warn you of a hazard. They tell you that there is something that you need to be aware of. It may not be dangerous, but it is a hazard. So you need to take warning. You need to raise your awareness. Think, don't just do. And then you've got your fire safety signs. Your fire safety signs, with the exception of your fire exits, because your fire exits are your safe conditions. Your fire safety signs are red with white lettering. They tell you, call point. They tell you hose reel. They tell you fire extinguisher here. So they're all standardized. Most people know what they mean. Have a Google. There is a British standard for them. And then we're going to look at special circumstances. So the ones that apply to us quite often could be lone working. So lone working is where you are in isolation from other workers. I tend to mean lone working is where if you shouted for help, nobody would hear you. That's what I generally tell people lone working means. It's a very loose, very rough and ready definition, but it kind of hits the nail on the head. You can be in a big office block where there are 100 people, but you can be a lone worker. You could also be a lone worker driving an RRV. you can be a lone worker walking between two venues. And that's because you've got an increased risk of violence. You have a worsening likelihood of harm if you have an accident or illness. There are complications with access and egress because you may be the only person in a building, so most of the doors are going to be locked. It may be that there are additional hazards. It may be that if you're operating machinery, and by machinery we include vehicles here, that there are increased hazards because there's nobody to raise the alarm or keep an eye on you. And you are more vulnerable because you are on your own. So we do have solo medics on film sets, but they're not necessarily lone working, because if they're shouted for help, then one of the runners or the first AD or somebody will hear them. So solo working is not the same as lone working. Lone working is a very strict definition in law. And the key factor with lone working is supervision. So supervision is clearly going to be remote for a lone worker, but it's about how that supervision is going to be monitored. So are you using an automated system where they have to check in every hour? Are you using a radio and is control checking on them? Is it a supervisor is going to give them a phone call every 2 hours? What are you going to do if they fail to respond? What process is in place to check on a lone worker who is not responding to an ordinary kind of supervision method? So we need to be thinking about that. We've also got confined spaces. Now, confined spaces anywhere where either there is an oxygen deficiency or there is a presence of a noxious gas in an area with limited means of access. So quite often theatres can have a lot of nitrous oxide, but that's fine because they're very, very well ventilated. But if we're setting stuff up in the back of a vehicle, that could end up very easily a confined space if we don't think through the ventilation requirements. So if we do end up in those situations, and vehicle inspection pits also count as confined spaces because certain emission gases sink because they're lower than air, we need to have emergency procedures. We need to have things like permit to work. We need to have supervision. There needs to be somebody outside the confined space aware of and monitoring what's going on inside the confined space. And the other one that we often inadvertently do is working at height. So we need to plan to avoid working at height if we can, set up at low and then raise the thing to high. If we can't do that, we need to prevent it. We need to look at permanent solutions for preventing any accidents. So things like collective protection, guardrails, they're generally better. Personal protection, so fall prevention devices, i.e. you tether yourself to a cord and therefore you're not going to be able to get close to the edge that you could fall off. And you then need to minimize what happens if an accident does take place, what you're going to land on, can we arrest that fall? But also if somebody is working at height and suffers an accident or an illness or unconsciousness while at height, what means do we have of rescuing that person? How can we get that person back down, or how can we get somebody up to them? Working at height, basically anything taller than your own body height is working at height, and that is off a surface that you can land on. So it is very possible to be 100 meters below ground and working at height, because if you're up a ladder in a mine, you're still working at height. It's also very possible to be working at height simply standing on a set of ladders next to your ambulance, because yes, you can lean one way onto your ambulance, but if you fall off the other way, you're above your own height. Even if you're only half the height of the ambulance, you could still be above your own height and you're working at height. So it doesn't matter where you specifically are. What matters is that from the next surface, the surface you're going to land on, you are greater than your own body height. That is working at height. So let's just recap. We've looked at environmental. We've looked at the things that we need to have in place in the environment for our staff to have good welfare. We've looked at the facilities that we need for our staff welfare and a safe working environment. We've looked at the particular hazards caused by vehicles and some of the control measures that may possibly be suitable in our environments. We've looked at the hazards posed by fire and how a medical provider increases those hazards, and we've had a whistle-stop tour of evacuations and extinguishers. We have looked through dangerous substances and what we need to consider. We've looked at some of the special circumstances, and we've looked at the signage that we may use to convey messages. Now, the one thing I do need to be very clear on is that all the information provided is based on United Kingdom legislation as of today, and that it is information only. It is not advice specific to anybody's circumstances. If you wish to know more, please do absolutely read the legislation yourself or consult an appropriate, experienced and ideally qualified health and safety advisor or expert or practitioner or consultant who are registered with one of the regulatory or leading CPD bodies such as IOSH or IIRSM, who will provide you. Let's have a little look. You're a restaurant, Thai food? Yes, yes, Chris, yes, please. Dorota, near a body of river is absolutely a hazard in itself. Can happen. It's just one of many things that I couldn't fit into the already 1 hour and 15-minute presentation. Chris, yep, likewise, I don't like to get wet neither. So thank you very much, everybody, for sticking with us, even though we overran. I'm sure many of you have stuck this long because you want your CPD certificates. So if you do, just email us webinars@promed999.co.uk with your full name. We are going to verify that you've been in our session throughout, and we'll verify that you leave us a review. Digital certificates are going to be available within 3 business days. It's unlikely to be over this weekend because we have an operations team meeting tomorrow lunchtime. We're out at the store tomorrow afternoon. We are doing a full audit and inventory of all of our equipment and assets on Saturday, and then we are rebuilding the store on Sunday. So operations team and admin team at ProMed have an incredibly busy weekend. It is likely to be Monday or Tuesday when we manage to get all of this done in terms of certificates, and it will be done before Wednesday because the operations and admin team are taking all of the kit that we've just found down to get serviced, so they're going to have another busy day then. So expect your certificates on Monday or Tuesday, please. Chris, FREC 3 done and FREC 4 starts. Absolutely fantastic. Really pleased to hear that. So please do leave us a review. We've provided this webinar, this CPD opportunity for you completely free of charge out of the goodness of our hearts because we want to drive up safety, we want to drive up standards and awareness in our industry. So please do leave us at least 1 review. We're not asking necessarily for a 5-star review or a thumbs up. What we're asking for is an honest review. And if we're not getting a 5-star or a thumbs up, what we'd like is to know how we can make this better for you, because feedback and constructive criticism, is what is going to allow us to improve these webinars and improve our offering and make them even better for you guys. We're putting them on for you. Tell us what we can do to make it better. Tell us what we're doing that is keeping you interested, and we can work with that. So we are on Trustpilot, we're on Yelp, we're on Google, we're on Facebook. If you have done any of those, please pick another one. If you've done all 4, wonderful. We're not asking you to do any more. But Trustpilot, Yelp, Google, and Facebook, that's what's kind of getting us noticed and out there. So we provide these webinars for free. You provide us with reviews, and then the rest of the world notices us, and clients then want to pay us money because they can see that we are a valuable, trustworthy company that people are leaving positive reviews about. So it's now on to questions. Andrew, you're very welcome. Stuart, you are very welcome. Alrada, sorry, I don't know how to pronounce that. That is going to be available. Admin team are going to post the links to the review sites any moment now. But it's now open to the floor. So if you have any questions, type them in the chat box, or if you raise your hand, we can invite you to unmute yourself and we can have some dialogue. So questions, please. Yep, fantastic, Chris. Your dog will be more than welcome next time. Okay, does anybody have any questions for us? Chat is open. Very welcome, Chris. Questions, questions, questions. Who has got anything they want to say to us? Diarmuid, you're very welcome. Chris, we've had somebody in King's Cross today. We have had people in North London, West London, East London, and South London in the last 2 weeks doing COVID swabbing. We are speaking with a client for 5 weeks of filming in early 2021. What else have we got going on at the moment in London? I dare say there are a few other things in the pipeline. I don't have the system in front of me. Yeah, do email us. David will get you through the system and get you on board as quickly as possible. Dorota, yes, absolutely. We do a risk assessment. We will always record our findings of that. So depending on what it is, sometimes that will be half a day on site walking around, looking at things, having meetings with the event safety team, discussing things, reading management plans, looking at site maps and feeding back. Sometimes it will be a very theoretical exercise, so we'll just have a little quick look and go, okay, that's absolutely fine. Uniform, generic greens, although we are in talks with a couple of different uniform suppliers, we're just looking at the best options that they're going to give us. We did have something, but the supplier that made them is no longer in business. So what we're looking at the moment is we're speaking with, I think, 3 different uniform suppliers, and we're just waiting on some designs to be returned to us because obviously we want to choose what's going to reflect our brand the best. Any more questions? Anything related to health and safety at all? No, that's absolutely fab. So don't forget to email webinars@promed999.co.uk with your full name. We'll verify that you've been in the session throughout and that you've left us a review, and we'll get your Digi certificates within 3 business days, which, as I say, is very likely to be Monday or Tuesday next week. Please do leave us a review on Trustpilot, Yale, Google, and Facebook. Thank you very much for your time this evening. Neil, indeed, we will see you next time. It's currently 2026, so what we're going to do is we're going to end it there, and we are going to give you about 4 minutes. So 2030 is when we'll cut off tonight. If you need to click any links or make any notes from the chat, that's your opportunity to do so. Have a very safe and enjoyable evening, everybody, and we'll see you next Thursday at 7 p.m. for our next webinar in the series. Good night. Bye-bye.